The sun had just begun its descent when I settled beneath the old cypress tree, its ancient limbs stretched wide as if embracing the very sky. I always found comfort under its shadow, where the noise of the world softened into a kind of sacred hush. The tree had stood long before my first breath and would likely remain long after my last. Its roots, deep and unshaken, reminded me of truths not written in books but etched into the marrow of the earth. The courtyard was quiet, save for the occasional call of a sparrow darting through the air and the low creak of wooden shutters being drawn closed against the settling evening. The scent of jasmine hung in the air, interwoven with the richer undertones of the earth, warm from the day's sun. In the distance, the dying light turned the roofs of Konya to glowing embers, and the marketplace sighed with the closing rhythm of human activity. Stall doors clattered shut, donkeys brayed wearily, the cadence of feet slowed as people returned to their homes, their shadows long and dissolving into one another. I sat cross-legged, robes gathered around me like a calm sea. My fingers absent-mindedly traced the lines of my palm, following the same ridges again and again like a path walked in prayer. Each line was a mystery to me, not because I sought to predict the future, but because each one spoke of the story I was still becoming, a topography of a life unfolding. And then, gently, a shadow came to rest at my feet. It was Yusuf, my student, my seeker, one who always carried questions in his eyes before they ever left his lips. He was young, but not with the arrogance of youth. He was thoughtful, like a man who has already tasted the edges of longing and found them sharp. I watched him for a moment as he stood there silently, his gaze shifting from the branches overhead to the ground beneath us, as though measuring the distance between heaven and earth. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely louder than the breeze. "Master," he said, "why do I feel so separate from everything around me?" That question. It did not come from the mind, it came from that deep hollow in the chest where the soul sometimes stirs, whispering of forgotten unity. His words struck something in me, something old and tender, like a bell rung in a faraway temple whose echoes still hum in the bones. It wasn't a question for understanding, but for remembering. I looked into his face and saw more than skin and sorrow. I saw the reflection of a question I too had once asked, long ago when I stood as he did now, young and aching to belong. I didn't answer right away. Words, when rushed, lose their sacred weight. I closed my eyes and allowed the question to settle in me, like a pebble dropping into a still pond, its ripples spreading through every chamber of my heart. In the silence, I listened, not to thoughts, but to the deeper rhythm, the soundless language spoken by cypress trees and moonlight, by the breath that comes before any word. I inhaled slowly, and in that breath, I felt the stone beneath me pressing upward with the same pressure I pressed downward upon it. I felt the wind touch my cheek like a mother's hand, carrying with it the warmth of distant lands and unseen fires. I felt the thrum of my own heartbeat, and how it seemed to keep time with the soft rustling of the leaves above. And then the veil lifted. The illusion parted for a moment. I saw the truth as clearly as sunlight filtering through a wine-colored curtain. I saw that I was not sitting beneath the tree, I was the tree. I was not apart from the wind, I was its voice, its echo, its movement. I was not surrounded by the world, I was the world, clothed temporarily in the body of a man, with a name and a history and a question asked beneath the golden sky. I opened my eyes and met Yusuf's. He was waiting, not impatiently, but with a kind of sacred hunger that reminded me of a child reaching toward a flame, unsure if it would warm him or burn. I smiled, not with certainty, but with compassion, and said, "Yusuf, you do not live in the world. You are the world." At first, his brow furrowed. Confusion passed over his face like a cloud covering the sun. "But master," he began, "I walk upon the earth, I see the sky above. I eat food grown from the soil, drink water drawn from rivers. If I were the world, would I not know it?" I gently raised my hand, not to stop his questioning, but to offer a space for silence. "Yes," I said softly, "you see the sky above you. You feel the ground beneath you. But that which sees and that which is seen, are they truly separate? Do you think the eyes and the stars are strangers to one another? That your breath and the air it draws come from different origins? That your blood and the rivers know different purposes? There is no inside or outside, no within or without. That idea is the root of your sorrow. You have mistaken the container for the contained, the skin for the soul, the wave for something other than the sea. He sat down beside me, cross-legged, silent now. I continued, not to instruct him, but to remind myself. The tree does not say, I am separate from the sun that nourishes me. The moon does not cry out, I am apart from the night. We humans, in our cleverness, have named things, stone, sky, hand, self, and in naming, we have forgotten that all these things flow from the same source. You are not a guest in this world. You are its voice, its gesture, its knowing. The air grew still around us, as though the world itself paused to listen. Yusuf closed his eyes. I watched his chest rise and fall with slow, reverent breath. Something in him was shifting, not dramatically, not like thunder, but like the slow turning of a flower toward the light. And in that moment, I knew, no word I had spoken would stay with him more powerfully than the silence we now shared. He had come with a question carved from pain, and he left with a seed, not an answer, but a quiet recognition. One day, in some distant hour, he would find himself walking through a forest or gazing into the eyes of a lover or listening to the sea, and he would remember. Not because I had told him, but because he had always known. And so I let the evening close in around us, the stars beginning to blossom overhead like the first words of a sacred poem. I sat quietly beneath the cypress, the earth cradling my weight, and I breathed in the wind that had no name, no origin, and no destination, only the eternal motion of the world, of which I was not a part, but completely and utterly one. That evening, after the last of my students had returned to their homes and the lingering warmth of the sun still kissed the courtyard stones, I felt a quiet pull rise within me, a gentle, irresistible invitation that came not from thought but from the soul itself. There are certain hours when the veil between the inner and outer world thins to the point of transparency, when the call of the unseen becomes so palpable, so intimate, that it draws you like a lover's whisper through the marrow of your bones. I stood slowly, dusted the folds of my robe, and walked toward the edge of Konya, letting the narrowing streets guide me like a stream toward something vast and waiting. The air was perfumed with the remnants of the day, baking bread, sandalwood smoke, rose water, the worn breath of donkeys, and the laughter of children dissolving into the dusk. But as I passed beyond the final line of homes, out into the untamed hush of the fields, the air changed. It became thick with stillness. Not the stillness of emptiness, but of presence. A full, breathing silence. The kind that holds everything without speaking a word. The tall grasses rolled out before me in waves, their tips catching the last honeyed strands of sunlight, glowing like halos. They shifted and swayed with the wind's invisible fingers, murmuring secrets to one another in a language older than script, older even than sound. I walked among them slowly, reverently, as one walks into a sacred chamber. With every step, I felt the distance between myself and the earth diminish. My feet did not press down upon the soil, rather, they met it with the familiarity of something returning home. Each blade of grass that brushed my ankles felt like a greeting, like the touch of an old friend who had waited a long time for me to remember my way back. And somehow, I knew they had. The land had been waiting, not impatiently, not with sorrow, but with the eternal patience of something that knows all return is inevitable. I wandered until I came upon a slight hill, nothing grand or boastful, just a gentle rise in the belly of the earth. I ascended it and sat, lowering myself with care as if the soil itself were sacred text. I placed both hands upon the earth, splayed my fingers wide, and closed my eyes. In that gesture alone, something ancient stirred. I did not feel as though I was merely touching the ground. I felt as if I were entering it, and it me, not with body but with awareness, as though the boundaries of my skin were illusions too fragile to hold back the truth. Beneath my hands, I felt the subtle thrum of life, a quiet vibration rising not from a single source but from 1,000 points all at once. The roots of the grasses, the scurrying of beetles, the tunneling of unseen worms, the deep stretch of mycelium threading its invisible network beneath me, all of it alive, all of it singing in its own way. And I was not separate from that chorus. I was the song. I was both the listening and the sound itself. My breath slowed, my chest expanded in rhythm with the heartbeat of the earth. Each inhale tasted like stone and leaf and sky, each exhale was a prayer without words. The stars had begun to appear, timid at first, blinking into visibility like eyes opening from sleep. They were not distant to me. They did not feel like faraway fires scattered across a ceiling of black silk. No, I felt them within me, as though they lived in the hollows of my bones, as though each rib was carved from their light. I looked up and saw myself looking back. I was the sky, and the sky was a mirror, reflecting not my form, but my being. Not my image, but my essence. And then the realization deepened. Not as a thought, thoughts are too small for such knowing. It was more like the parting of clouds to reveal a mountain you had always felt but never seen. I understood, truly, that I was not an observer walking through this world, collecting experiences like coins in a purse. I was not a traveler moving through a landscape of objects and others. I was the landscape. I was not looking at nature, I was nature. My fingers, the branches, my veins, the rivers, my breath, the wind. I did not belong to the world because I had been placed here. I belonged because I was here. Because there was no me without it, and no it without me. I remembered then how we so often believe ourselves to be islands, isolated, contained, defined by skin and name and circumstance. But sitting there, surrounded by grasses and stars and the heartbeat of the soil, I saw that there are no islands. Only illusions of separation. The same wind that touched the mountains in the north now whispered across my cheek. The same water that fed the cedars now pulsed through my blood. The breath that stirred the grasses was no different from the breath that moved in and out of my chest. The boundaries had never existed except in the mind, and even the mind, when quieted, revealed its oneness with the whole. A small bird landed near me, tilted its head, and then began to peck at the earth with a calm purpose. It did not startle, even as I moved my hand slowly toward it. We shared the space between us as if it had never been divided. And in that moment, I thought, how often do we claim dominion over the world? How often do we speak of it as though it were an object, a possession, a resource? We forget that we do not exist on the earth like something resting on a surface. We exist as the earth, no more or less vital than the stone, the tree, the wind, or the bird pecking beside us. Night deepened until the world turned to shadow, and still I sat. Hours may have passed, or none at all. Time had grown quiet in the face of such vastness. Finally, I rose, my legs tingling from stillness, and began the slow walk back toward the city. But I was not the same man who had left its gates. I had gone into the wilderness as a body moving through space. I returned knowing that there was no space I was not already part of. My hands, though empty, felt full. My breath, though simple, felt infinite. Each footstep felt less like movement and more like memory, like a returning to something so ancient and sacred that it had no name. The world did not surround me. It was me. And I was it. A single note in the divine melody that has no beginning and no end. A note that, in being sung, sings the entire cosmos with it. And from that night on, every poem I would write, every lesson I would offer, every glance I would share, it would all be in service of reminding others what I now knew in my very soul: you don't live in the world. You are the world. The mosque that night was thick with silence, not the silence of absence, but the silence of expectancy, the kind that arrives only when the heart begins to listen, not just to words, but to what lies behind them. The lamps burned low along the arched alcoves, casting shifting shadows that moved like ancient spirits on the walls, swaying in rhythm with the slow breath of the universe. The stone beneath me was cool, grounding, and the air smelled of saffron, myrrh, and the last traces of rosewater poured earlier into the corner basins. Outside, Kanya had begun its quiet descent into sleep, but within this sacred space, eyes remained open, minds remained lit, hearts remained trembling on the verge of revelation. My companions had gathered without prompting. Some were students who had followed me for years, others were new to this path, still trembling from the wounds of the world, desperate for something that might carry the weight of their longing. Their bodies formed a quiet circle around me, and though no words had yet been spoken, I felt their questions rise like incense. They had not come merely to hear me speak. They had come to remember something they had lost, not to learn, but to awaken. And I, too, had come not to teach, but to bear witness to the sacred unfolding that happens when one human heart meets another in truth. I let the silence linger, for silence is never empty, it is the vessel in which all true words must be poured. I waited until the stillness began to hum with its own presence, until it filled the space like water in a well, reaching every dark corner of the soul. Only then did I raise my eyes and begin, my voice barely louder than the wind. You look at the stars, I said, and believe they are far from you. You imagine them to be high above, scattered like silver dust across a black dome, and you think yourself a small thing beneath them. But this, my beloved friends, is the first illusion, the illusion of distance. I looked into the eyes of each one gathered there. Qasim, the young scholar whose mind hungered for clarity. Zainab, who had buried her husband the year before and still carried her sorrow folded into every crease of her hands. Malik, the merchant with calloused fingers and a heart that pulsed like a boy's. They were all mirrors, each one reflecting a different shade of the same light. You say, I am here, and the stars are there. But what if the stars are not above you, but within you? What if the light you see in the heavens is the same light that flickers behind your ribs when you are alone and afraid? What if the cosmos you gaze upon with awe is only a reminder of your own infinite nature, veiled, forgotten, waiting to be rediscovered? They did not speak. Their silence was their answer. I could see it in the stillness of their hands, in the way their bodies leaned forward slightly, as if the soul itself was reaching toward something just beyond the edge of understanding. I continued, slower now, each word descending like a drop of rain into a thirsty field. When I say you are the world, I do not mean it in metaphor. I do not speak in riddles. I speak plainly, plainly as the sky speaks with color and the river speaks in movement. You do not stand in the world as a figure placed upon a page. You are the page. You are the ink. You are the hand that writes and the breath that gives the hand life. I pointed to the lamp beside me, its flame swaying gently in the night air. This flame, I said, is not separate from the fire that lights the stars. Do you understand? It is not a smaller flame, it is the same fire, simply expressed here in this small vessel, for this small time. You, too, are a vessel. You carry the fire of the universe in the shape of a body, in the music of your heartbeat. And just as the lamp will one day go out, so too will the body. But the fire, it never dies. Zainab's eyes were wet now. Not with grief, but with the ache of recognition. Not sorrow, but remembrance. She clutched her prayer beads tighter, not out of fear, but out of awe, as though she were suddenly holding something more alive than she had ever realized. I stood then, slowly, and walked to the center of the circle. My robes whispered against the stone as I moved. The light of the lamps flickered over my shoulders, casting me both in shadow and in light, just as we all are, always both, always both. Each of you, I said, turning gently to take them all in, carries a sky within your chest. You think the stars are distant, but you forget that every atom in your body was born from the same fire that forged those suns. You are not the observer of creation. You are creation. You are not witnessing a story, you are the ink with which the story is written. Qasim raised his hand slightly, his voice quiet but urgent. But if that is true, Master, why do I feel so small? Why do I walk through the world as though I am merely a guest, forever separate from the beauty I long to touch? I smiled, not at his ignorance, but at his honesty. The truth always begins with an honest question. Because, I said gently, you have been taught to see only with the eyes in your head. But there are other eyes, my child. The eye of the heart. The eye of the soul. The eye that sees not form, but essence. And when that eye opens, you will no longer see yourself as a guest. You will see yourself as the home itself. Not the guest in the world, but the world in motion. A long silence followed. No one spoke. No one moved. The lamps continued to flicker. A faint wind stirred through the open arches, carrying with it the scent of the desert beyond the city, dry and ancient and full of secrets. And in that silence, something began to happen, not outwardly, but within. I felt it in the air, in the way it thickened, heavy with presence. I felt it in the hearts around me, how they began to soften, to loosen their grip on the illusion of separateness. I felt it in my own chest, the same warmth I always feel when a soul begins to awaken. It is a warmth like a sunrise behind the ribs. Not sudden, not loud, but undeniable. I knelt again, letting my knees press into the stone, and looked around the circle. Remember this, I said softly. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. The stardust in your bones is not poetry, it is fact. The breath you take is not borrowed, it is ancestral. The light in your eyes is not reflection, it is origin. You do not walk through this world alone, my dear ones. You walk as the world, and the world walks as you. And then I said no more. There was nothing else to say. Words had taken them as far as they could. The rest belonged to silence. To breath. To the opening of the inner eye. We sat there for a long time, the mosque cradling us in its ancient arms, the night wrapping around us like a great shawl of stars. And in that sacred stillness, I felt it again, that immense, wordless truth that pulses beneath all things. We are not separate. We never were. The world does not surround us. It is us. And we, it. We are not in the story. We are the story, dreaming itself alive. I walked until the soles of my sandals thinned and the skin beneath them thickened into calluses. The sky overhead shifted from soft blue to deep sapphire, and yet I did not tire, for I was not merely walking, I was being walked by something beyond will, beyond thought. My legs moved as if the earth was lifting me forward, step by step, with the gentleness of a mother guiding her child across a narrow stream. I wandered through groves of cypress and fig, past crumbling ruins where vines had made poetry of abandonment, and into open fields where silence settled like dew upon the grass. Each breath was not taken by me, it was breathed through me, as if the entire world was exhaling and I happened to be standing in the path of its rhythm. The further I went, the more the idea of further dissolved. Distance no longer had meaning. I could not tell whether I was heading outward into the wilderness or inward toward the center of myself. And perhaps there was no difference. The landscape I passed through, each rock, each leaf, each bird whose cry split the air, seemed to mirror my own soul, revealing aspects of myself I had never seen before. The crumbling stone walls reminded me of the structures I had built in my heart, beliefs I clung to, judgments I sharpened like blades. The whispering trees reminded me of thoughts left unspoken, truths I feared to utter even to myself. And the river, always the river, glimmering through every valley, was the constant flow of love that had always been there, waiting patiently for me to kneel beside it and drink. I found myself standing at the edge of a cliff, overlooking a vast expanse of earth that stretched toward the horizon like a prayer unfolding. Below, the valley breathed, a patchwork of fields, olive trees, winding paths, and distant villages. I sat cross-legged at the edge, not out of ritual, but because something inside me simply said, "Now, be still." And I obeyed. Not out of duty, but out of surrender. There was no longer a teacher in me, no seeker, no thinker. Only one who listened. And in that silence, the veil grew thinner than ever before. I felt myself expanding, not upward, not outward, but inward, so deeply that there was no longer a boundary to mark where I ended and the world began. I was the wind brushing the tops of trees. I was the warmth in the sun's rays, the coolness in the shadow, the grain of the soil. I was not simply in the world, I was of it, with it, through it. There was no out there anymore. The very notion of external shattered like thin glass. My skin was no longer a border, my body no longer a container. I was the clay and the sculptor, the ocean and the drop, the poem and the breath that recites it. A bird landed nearby, small and unafraid, its head tilted as if curious. I looked into its eyes, and for a moment I understood its fluttering heart as if it were my own. I did not simply observe the bird, I felt what it felt, the lift of air under wing, the delicate hunger in its belly, the innocent alertness that comes from existing without expectation. The same light that danced in its eye danced in mine. There was no difference. I reached toward it, not with my hand, but with my stillness, and it stayed. And in that silent moment, I knew something the books could never teach, that to truly see another being is not to study it, categorize it, or name it, but to recognize it as yourself wearing a different shape. Time passed. Or perhaps it didn't. The sun began to fall, casting long shadows across the land, and I remained unmoved. Not because I was frozen, but because I had nowhere else to go. I was already home. I had always been home. The home was not a structure or a place. It was the realization, you don't live in the world, you are the world. Every hunger I had felt, every longing, every question, was not a cry for something outside me. It was the call of the whole within me, asking me to return. As twilight deepened, I stood slowly, every movement echoing a reverence I could not explain. I did not want to leave the moment, but I also knew I could never leave it again. Once the veil is lifted, you cannot unknow the light. Once the illusion is broken, even the fragments shine with truth. I began to walk back, but not back in the sense of retreat. Rather, I walked forward into the tapestry of the world, now knowing that every thread, every person, every flower, every pain and joy and cry and silence, was me. And I was them. When I passed the shepherd again, he greeted me with the same gentle nod, but this time something passed between us, a warmth, a recognition not of names or titles, but of essence. He did not speak, but I felt his awareness wrap around me like a cloak. In him, I saw myself tending the sheep. In his simple, rugged hands, I saw the patience I had once longed for. And I knew, he too was the world, the whole of it, compact and vast, flesh and spirit, form and emptiness. As I entered the outskirts of the city, where stone met shadow and lanterns flickered in alleyways, I felt the lives behind every door, a mother rocking her child, a boy dreaming of distant lands, an old man watching his memories float through tea steam. I heard their breath, and it was my breath. I felt their ache, and it was mine. I knew that even in the darkest corners, the divine glowed quietly, like an ember waiting for the soul's breath to ignite it. There was no longer a them. There was only one flame wearing a million faces. And as I walked through the night, every face I passed glowed with that light. I greeted them not as strangers, but as forgotten limbs of my own body, and with each smile I received, I felt the world nod back to me, saying, yes. You've remembered. The days that followed passed like wine through reeds, quiet, flowing, and alive with whispers that only the soul can understand. I walked not with intention but with surrender, as if my feet had become prayers pressed into the earth with every step. The city behind me had its own rhythm, a pulse of voices and footsteps and laughter spilling into the alleys, but I found myself drawn again towards solitude, not out of loneliness, but because the silence now spoke louder than the noise. I no longer sought to escape the world. Instead, I was trying to listen to it, knowing that the world was not a place I entered, but a mirror of myself I was slowly beginning to recognize. I sat often by a small pool fed by a mountain spring, its water so still that even the sky hesitated before touching it. Here, the reflections were not just of clouds or trees, they were of the self stripped of names, histories, and attachments. When I looked into that water, I did not see a man named Rumi. I saw an opening, a vastness that both frightened and comforted me, as if the soul had been waiting for this meeting since before the first heartbeat. I watched a single leaf fall into the water and ripple across the surface, and something in that motion cracked a truth open in me. I was not the one watching the leaf fall. I was the leaf. I was the water. I was the ripple. I was all of it. Thoughts began to arise, but they did not cling to me as they once did. They passed like clouds, some dark, some light, all temporary. Even the thoughts that used to define me, my fears, my ambitions, my sorrows, lost their grip. They no longer had a place to anchor because I was no longer a container for stories. I had become a sky too vast to hold a single storm for long. When sadness came, I welcomed it with the same tenderness as I did joy, knowing now that both were instruments playing the same music. And when joy came, I did not grasp it greedily, for I knew it too would pass, only to return again like a faithful tide. One morning, a boy appeared beside the pool. He could not have been more than 10 years old, with dust on his cheeks and mischief in his eyes. He did not speak at first. He only watched me, his head tilted slightly, as if he were trying to understand what I was doing by staring so long into still water. I smiled and said nothing, and he finally asked, "Are you waiting for something to appear?" I laughed, not because his question was foolish, but because it carried the wisdom of the ages. "Yes," I told him, "I am waiting to disappear." He furrowed his brow, clearly unsure of what that meant, and I ruffled his hair. "You'll understand when you no longer think of the wind as something outside you." He stayed beside me, skipping stones across the surface. Each stone danced, bounced, and sank. And with each skip, I felt my thoughts do the same, brief contact with the surface, followed by surrender into depth. The boy asked if I lived here, and I told him, "I live where breath lives." He nodded solemnly, as children do when they don't fully grasp your words but know they're important. Then, he ran off with a grin, his laughter trailing like a thread of gold through the trees. For a moment, I felt the whole world run with him, myself as the child, the wind, the earth beneath his feet. Later that day, I watched a line of ants carry crumbs toward their nest. Such a small scene, yet I could not pull my gaze away. Each ant moved with purpose, with unity, yet there was no overseer, no command shouted, no hesitation. The entire movement seemed orchestrated by something invisible and perfect. It reminded me of how thoughts travel through the mind, how stars arrange themselves into constellations, how love moves from heart to heart without needing a map. I watched until the sun turned the sky amber, and then I lay on my back, letting the world cover me like a soft blanket of breath and meaning. Night came gently, and the stars unfolded like ancient letters written in light. I thought of how long they had burned, how many eyes had looked up and seen them, how many prayers had risen beneath their glow. And suddenly, I understood, those stars were not distant. They were inside me, as surely as my heartbeat or my longing. The whole cosmos was within this flesh, within this soul. The heavens weren't above, they were through. To look out was to look in. To explore the world was to explore myself. The distance between I and it had vanished. A fire crackled nearby, and I fed it slowly, watching the flames lick the night like tongues of light. Each log I placed was like an offering, not to a god in the sky, but to the sacredness of being itself. I whispered verses, not to impress the wind or earn favor from stars, but because something in me had to speak. Not me, Rumi, but the world within me, yearning to give voice to its own silence. The words rose like smoke, thin and true. I do not live in the world. I am the flame and the ash, the song and the silence, the breath that forgets the mouth it came from. As I spoke, I felt something ancient stir. Not a revelation, but a remembering. I remembered being the ocean in a storm. I remembered being the mountain beneath armies that marched and vanished. I remembered being the feather falling from the wing of a bird too high to see. And in this remembering, I felt not special, but whole, undivided, unfragmented, holy. I looked again into the fire, and it did not burn as fire alone. It burned as me. It burned as you. It burned as the unseen presence that connects all things, not by rope or thread, but by essence. And in that warmth, I found peace deeper than peace. A peace that did not need stillness or safety. A peace that was, and always had been, waiting for me to notice that I was it. And so, I sat through the night, not longing for dawn, because the dawn was already inside me. The morning light crept slowly through the lattice windows of my chamber, spilling onto the worn rug where I had slept beneath a simple quilt. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of jasmine from the garden below, a reminder that even in stillness, the world continued its endless dance of renewal. I rose with the dawn not because duty demanded it, but because the unfolding of day called to something deep within me, a sacred rhythm that moves beyond clocks and calendars. The city stirred softly outside, the distant calls of merchants preparing their stalls, the shuffle of feet on cobblestone, the murmur of prayers rising like incense into the vast sky. As I walked barefoot through the courtyard, my toes sinking into the cool earth, I felt the pulse of life beneath me, steady, patient, eternal. This earth, this soil, was not mere dirt to be crossed or conquered. It was the very body from which all things arise and to which all things return. I knelt and let my palms press into its surface, the rough grains grounding me, reminding me that to be is to belong, to be held, embraced, enfolded by the world I so often thought separate from myself. In that simple act, I found a profound teaching. The boundary between me and the world was a veil woven from thought and habit. It was not real, but an illusion, a shadow cast by the mind's desire to contain what is infinite. My hands were not on soil. The soil was within my hands. The earth did not hold me, I held the earth. The same breath that rose in my chest stirred the dust and the leaves. The same fire that burned in my veins was the fire that lit the sun and warmed the stones. Rising slowly, I gazed upward, feeling the sky stretch endlessly above me, an ocean of blue and gold and possibility. And yet, the sky was not above me in the way I had once believed. It was the space inside me, the vast openness where thoughts and fears dissolved like morning mist. The clouds drifting across that expanse were not distant strangers, but reflections of the ever-changing dance within my own heart. I breathed deeply, inhaling the essence of this vastness, letting it fill the hollows left by doubt and fear. Later, as the sun climbed higher, I walked among the olive trees whose twisted trunks bore witness to centuries of wind and sun and rain. Their branches stretched wide, leaves shimmering silver green in the light. I reached out and touched the bark, rough and ancient, feeling the slow wisdom pulsing beneath the surface. I realized then that these trees did not live the way I thought of life. They did not strive or hurry. They simply were, rooted and reaching, breathing slowly with the earth itself. And in their stillness was a profound lesson. To be present is to be alive. To be alive is to be one with all that surrounds you. Sitting beneath the shade, I closed my eyes and let the wind carry me. It whispered stories of distant mountains and silent deserts, of rivers carving valleys through stone, of stars burning in the deep blackness. The wind was not a visitor, it was a part of me, as I was part of it. The dance of air and leaf and spirit swirled inside me like a sacred song. I felt myself dissolve into the breeze, becoming neither separate nor merged, but something new, an unfolding presence that was both everything and nothing. In that unfolding, I glimpsed the truth behind all teachings, that to truly live is not to grasp or control, but to surrender and belong. To belong not as a subject looking upon the world, but as the world itself breathing, moving, dreaming. The rivers are not in the world, they are the world. The mountains do not exist apart from the earth, they are the earth's breath, her bones, her voice. And so it is with us. We do not live in the world. We are the world, in all its vastness and mystery, its light and shadow, its creation and destruction. When I opened my eyes, the world had not changed, but I had. The olive trees still stood, the wind still sang, the sun still shone. Yet I carried within me a deep peace, a knowing that the separation I had believed in was an illusion woven by the mind's fears. I was not a solitary figure moving through an external landscape. I was the landscape. I was the breath that stirred the leaves. I was the pulse beneath the earth. I was the silent song of the stars. Returning to the city as the day grew warmer, I walked with lighter steps, my heart open as a sky without clouds. The faces I passed were not strangers but reflections, each one a fragment of the same vast whole. I smiled at a child chasing a bird, knowing that his laughter was my laughter, his joy my own. I greeted an old woman selling bread, understanding that her hands and mine were woven from the same ancient thread. And as I returned to my humble home, I carried the world within me, not as a burden, but as a blessing. I no longer lived in the world. I was the world, and the world was me, one breath, one song, one endless unfolding of love. I found myself wandering again, this time beneath a sky heavy with clouds that promised rain, the kind of rain that whispers secrets as it falls, soaking into the earth and awakening hidden roots. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil and wild herbs, and every breath I took felt charged with the quiet power of impending transformation. As I moved through the fields, my footsteps softened by the lush grass, I realized that the world I had always perceived as solid and separate was more fluid, more alive, than I had ever imagined. It was a living tapestry woven from threads of wind and water, earth and fire, light and shadow, and I was not a mere observer but a single, vital strand within that great fabric. The clouds above shifted slowly, rolling like great waves across the sky, their edges softened by the fading light. I lifted my face to the heavens, feeling the first cool drops on my skin, gentle, tender, a baptism without words. The rain spoke a language older than human tongues, a language of renewal and release, washing away the dust of old beliefs and fears that had settled deep within me. In that moment, I did not stand apart from the storm. I was the storm, the gathering of clouds and the fall of rain, the stirring of air and the trembling of leaves. I thought then of the river that runs through our lands, how it carves its path not by force but by persistence, by yielding to the contours of earth, finding its way through the smallest cracks and the deepest valleys alike. Like that river, I felt myself moving not against the world but with it, surrendering to the currents of existence that flow beneath the surface of what we see. To live as the world is to live without resistance, to flow with the eternal rhythms that carry us beyond the illusion of control and separation. As the rain intensified, I sought shelter beneath a wide-branched walnut tree, its leaves shimmering like dark emeralds in the wet light. The tree's sturdy trunk rose from the ground like a pillar of strength, grounded in the earth yet reaching toward the sky. I placed my hands upon its bark, rough and alive with texture, and felt the heartbeat beneath my palms. The tree did not ask questions, did not strive or fear, it simply was, rooted, reaching, breathing. In its quiet presence, I understood that to be the world is to embody that patient strength, to hold space for both storm and calm, both growth and stillness. I sat there for a long time, listening to the rain's steady rhythm, feeling it seep into the soil, nourishing unseen seeds and roots. My thoughts slowed, melting into the sound of water and wind. The boundaries between inside and outside blurred until they vanished entirely. I was no longer separate from the rain or the tree or the earth beneath me. I was rain falling, tree growing, soil breathing. I was the endless cycle of becoming and unbecoming, the dance of birth and death that sustains all life. The rain softened to a gentle mist, and I stood, feeling the cool droplets mingle with the warmth of my skin. A small bird flitted from branch to branch, its feathers glistening with moisture. I watched it for a moment, marveling at its fragile yet fierce life, how it moved with grace and purpose through the wet world. In its flight, I saw the freedom that comes from surrender, the freedom to move as the wind moves, to be carried without losing oneself. Walking back toward the village, the path glistening with puddles that mirrored the soft light of the sky, I felt a deep gratitude rise within me. Gratitude not for what I possessed or what I hoped to achieve, but for the simple, profound gift of being. To be the earth beneath my feet, the sky above my head, the breath moving through my lungs. To be the world, endlessly unfolding, endlessly renewing. That night, beneath a canopy of stars emerging after the storm, I sat by a fire and let its warmth fill me. The flames danced and flickered, alive with the same restless energy I had felt all day. I whispered to the fire, to the night, to the vastness within and without. You are not something apart from me. I am not something apart from you. We are one flame, one breath, one song. That sings itself into being forevermore. And as the fire's glow painted shadows on the walls, I felt myself dissolve once again into the great mystery, no longer a separate self wandering through the world, but the world itself, breathing, loving, becoming. The days grew longer and warmer, and I found myself drawn again into the heart of the bustling marketplace, where the colors, sounds, and sense of life swirled in a wild, chaotic dance. At first, the noise overwhelmed me, the cries of merchants hawking their goods, the clatter of carts over uneven stones, the laughter of children chasing one another between stalls piled high with spices, textiles, and fruit. Yet, as I lingered, standing quietly amid the river of faces and voices, I began to see through the surface of this busy world to the deeper truth flowing beneath. This was not merely a marketplace, it was a living tapestry, each person a thread woven into the vast, intricate fabric of existence. And I was not apart from it, I was woven in as surely as the brightest silk among the humblest cotton. I walked slowly, my senses alive to every detail, the rough skin of a vendor's hands, the gleam in a mother's eye as she watched her child, the worn leather of a saddle, the rich scent of cardamom and fresh bread mixing in the air. I met the eyes of passers-by, some curious, some weary, some bright with hope. And in each gaze, I glimpsed not a stranger, but a reflection of myself, a mirror held up by the world to show me who I truly am. The man haggling over a piece of cloth was not separate from me. His struggle, his desire, his joy were threads in the same pattern that shaped my soul. The woman selling figs, her face lined with years of labor and laughter, carried the same fire I felt flickering within my own heart. Amid the chaos, I found moments of stillness, a child reaching out to touch a bird in a cage, an elder offering a quiet blessing to a passerby, a pair of friends sharing a secret smile. These moments were like pearls strung on the thread of life, delicate and luminous. They spoke of connection, of belonging, of the invisible bonds that unite us all. I realized that to say, I am the world, is not to claim some lofty isolation, but to embrace the messy, beautiful reality of shared existence, the heartbreak and the hope, the suffering and the joy, the pain and the healing. I paused beside a fountain, its water sparkling in the afternoon sun, and cupped my hands to drink. The water was cool and sweet, a simple gift flowing from the earth to quench thirst. As I drank, I felt the water move through me, becoming a part of my blood, my breath, my being. It was a sacred reminder that the world is not something separate from us, but something we carry within, the water, the air, the fire, and the earth all mingling inside our bones and blood. We do not live in the world, we are the world, breathing and moving in endless unity. A young girl approached, shy but curious, her hands holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. She offered them to me without words, and I accepted with gratitude, feeling the softness of petals that seemed to carry the scent of the entire meadow. In that simple exchange, I saw the heart of what it means to be one with the world, the giving and receiving that flows between us, the recognition of shared life, the silent acknowledgement of our shared breath. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the cobblestones, I climbed to the rooftop of a nearby house to watch the city transform. Lights flickered on like scattered stars, lanterns bobbed in windows, and the hum of life softened into a gentle murmur. From this vantage point, the city was no longer a jumble of separate parts, but a single living organism, pulsing, breathing, dreaming. And within that organism, I was a cell, a spark, a pulse of light. The sky deepened to indigo, and stars emerged, silent witnesses to the eternal dance unfolding beneath them. I lifted my face to the heavens, feeling the vastness of the cosmos fold into the intimacy of my heart. The same fire that burned in those distant suns burned within me. The same vastness that stretched across the night sky stretched within my soul. I was the world, and the world was me, inseparable, indivisible, infinite. As darkness wrapped the city in its quiet embrace, I closed my eyes and let the truth settle deep inside. No longer could I see myself as a solitary figure walking through a distant landscape. I was the landscape itself, the wind in the trees, the earth beneath the stones, the song in the voices around me. I was the heartbeat of the world, the breath of the stars, the flame that never dies. And in that knowing, I found a peace beyond all understanding, a peace that comes not from holding on, but from letting go, not from grasping, but from surrendering, not from separating, but from becoming one with all that is. The coolness of the evening air wrapped around me as I wandered through the quiet streets, the fading light painting the walls in hues of amber and rose. The city, usually a cacophony of voices and footsteps, had softened into a gentle hum, a breath held in reverence, a moment suspended between day and night. I found myself drawn toward the ancient garden at the edge of town, where cypress and pomegranate trees stood sentinel beneath the wide sky, their leaves whispering secrets older than memory. As I stepped inside, the scent of earth and blossoms mingled with the last warmth of sunlight, and I felt the weight of the world lift from my shoulders, replaced by a profound stillness that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of all creation. I sat upon a weathered stone bench, its surface cool and rough beneath my palms, and let my gaze wander upward to the sky, now deepening into twilight. Stars began to wink into existence, tiny sparks of light piercing the gathering darkness, and I marveled at their quiet persistence, their ancient stories written across the vast canvas of night. For a moment, I thought of how many eyes, how many hearts, had looked up at these very stars, seeking guidance, solace, or simply a glimpse of something beyond themselves. And then I understood, those stars were not distant strangers but reflections of the light within me, the same light that flickers in every soul brave enough to seek truth beyond the veil. The garden around me breathed softly, alive with the chorus of crickets and the rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Each sound wove into the tapestry of night, a reminder that life flows endlessly through every form, every shadow, every silence. I felt myself dissolve into that flow, no longer a separate self observing from the outside, but the river and the stone, the wind and the tree, the question and the answer. The borders that once defined I and other blurred and faded until they vanished entirely. I was the garden, and the garden was me. A nightingale sang from a nearby branch, its melody pure and haunting, echoing the longing nestled deep within my heart. Its song spoke not just of yearning, but of belonging, the longing to merge, to be known, to return home. I closed my eyes and let the music carry me beyond thought, beyond form, into a place where only being remains. In that sacred space, I glimpsed the truth I had been chasing, that the world is not a stage upon which I perform, nor a puzzle I must solve. It is the very essence of my being, the mirror in which my soul is reflected endlessly. As darkness deepened, the cool night air kissed my skin, and I breathed in the silence that spoke volumes. The stars above seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, a cosmic dance uniting the microcosm and the macrocosm. I realized then that I did not inhabit the world, I was the world, unfolding in every moment, in every breath, in every beat of my heart. To live is to be that unfolding, to embrace the mystery and the wonder, the light and the shadow, the eternal dance of coming and going. When I finally rose from the bench, the garden felt like a sacred sanctuary, not because of its walls or trees, but because of the awakening that had taken root within me. The world was no longer something outside my grasp, something to be sought or feared. It was the living pulse of my own soul, the endless horizon within which I journeyed, the infinite home where I am both traveler and destination. Walking back through the quiet streets, the night wrapping around me like a soft cloak, I carried that knowing deep in my heart. I was not alone, nor separate, but woven into the vast web of existence, one thread among countless others, yet essential, radiant, whole. And in that truth, I found a peace that no storm could shake, a light that no darkness could dim, a love that is not mine or yours, but ours, the boundless, unending heart of the world itself. There came a moment, in the quiet hours before dawn, when the world seemed to hold its breath, suspended between night and day, darkness and light. I sat alone on the rooftop of my humble home, the cool stones beneath me still bearing the memory of the night's chill, the sky above shifting slowly from deep indigo to soft hues of lavender and gold. The city around me slept, the usual bustle hushed into a gentle stillness that felt sacred, as if the very air itself were waiting for a secret to be whispered. In that sacred silence, I felt a stirring deep within, a recognition not of words or images, but of pure being, raw and unfiltered. I breathed in the cool morning air, each inhale a communion with all that is, each exhale a surrender to the vastness within and without. In this stillness, the boundaries that had long defined me, the lines drawn by name, by history, by the self, began to blur and dissolve. There was no longer a separate I watching the world from a distance. There was only the world breathing, moving, alive in me and through me. I was not an inhabitant of the world, I was the world itself, in all its endless unfolding. The stars faded gently as the first light of dawn painted the horizon, and with them, the illusion of separation began to lift like morning mist. I felt the rhythm of life pulsing through me, the steady heartbeat of the earth beneath my feet, the whisper of wind weaving through olive branches, the soft murmur of a distant stream flowing toward the sea. All of it was a single, living breath, and I was both the breath and the being breathing it. Memories drifted through my mind, not as stories of a distant past, but as threads of connection woven into the vast tapestry of existence. I saw myself as a child, curious and wide-eyed, reaching toward the sun with trembling hands. I saw the faces of those I had loved and lost, their smiles and sorrows etched into the fabric of my soul. I saw the countless lives that had come before and would come after, each one a spark in the endless flame of being. And I understood that we are not separate flames, but a single fire burning through time and space, forever and ever. As the sun rose higher, casting its golden light over the city, I felt a profound gratitude swell within me, a gratitude not for what I had or had not achieved, but for the simple, miraculous gift of existence. To be alive, to breathe, to feel, to love, to suffer, to hope, all of it was part of the sacred dance, the divine mystery unfolding without beginning or end. To live was to be a part of this mystery, not as a distant observer, but as a living expression of its boundless beauty and depth. I stood slowly, the stones beneath my feet grounding me even as my spirit soared. The world awakened around me, the call of a morning bird, the rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze, the distant laughter of children greeting a new day. Each sound, each movement, each breath was a reminder that I was not apart from life, but its very heart. I was the world's eyes and ears, its hands and feet, its song and silence. And in that knowing, a profound peace settled over me, a peace that transcended understanding, a light that shone without flicker or shadow. I no longer carried the burden of separation or the illusion of otherness. I was whole, complete, and endlessly connected to all that is. The world was not a place to be conquered or escaped, but the very ground of my being, the breath of my soul, the endless home where I belong. With the dawn unfolding around me, I whispered into the morning air, a prayer and a promise woven from the deepest part of myself. You do not live in the world. You are the world. The river flowing through every valley. The fire burning in every heart. The sky stretching beyond all horizons. In you is all that ever was and all that ever will be. In you is the endless, boundless love that holds us all. And as the sun rose fully, bathing the earth in light, I stepped forward into the day, not as a solitary traveler, but as the world itself, moving, breathing, loving, forever unfolding in the sacred dance of existence.